Hello, everybody. Just sitting here in my Joe Exotic fucking creepy sniffer corpse shirt, because I don't think that motherfucker's alive at all. But I just got my phone call because telling the lady from disability that I know that I am an angel hybrid with a Nephilim indigo type 3, right? Tell this lady all kinds of stuff. And then I go, hey, if you don't believe me, feel free to check out my YouTube channel. Actually, please do. If you think that I'm lying right now about everything I'm saying, please watch me fumble fuck through a spiritual awakening, and I could kind of crack you in the right direction pretty fast. If you're spiritually asleep and you're not just some government agent like a lot of them are. And she orders the NeuroPsych testing that I have been wanting. And I've been unemployed since my birthday, since November 19th. And disability, which I do not want to fucking be on for long. I need a fucking crutch, because this kind of information explodes lives so badly. You lose all of your references. At Buka, that fucking haunted, nasty ass place I was working at, they can do things and have put a block on my name because they don't like me. So what happens when you piss off some catty, bitchy, nasty, dirty employers is they will block you in their system so that all of the other corrupt companies that are owned by Earl Enterprises, when you apply, you will automatically get discarded, is how fucking nasty these places are. While they don't have any cameras, so that you can't see all the illegal Mexicans working there and all of the illegal immigrants, so that you can't see all of the thievery and all of the demonic attacks on people there, and so that you can't see their managers making buku bucks, hurrying up at the end of the night and just rinsing off silverware and water just to put them back in the bins and make the company happy by getting all of their work done on time, but it's not being clean. So, fuck this shit. I literally want to fucking reroute my life to spirituality, and I want to be able to afford the coursework that it costs and that it takes to be a productive and good spiritual fucking healer out there with all of these fakes and fraud pieces of shit. I want to be able to afford the courseworks to be able to remove J seals and Draco seals and shit like that. And they will not advance my disability case until I have this NeuroPsych testing. So I get the phone call about scheduling it. And I'm on there with a lady I can't fucking understand. I'm sitting there trying to press 1 for fucking English. Can't understand this lady at all. And she goes and she tells me that the earliest appointment they have is May 8th. And I was like, oh, okay. 3 more months. Really? I've been waiting for disability and dealing with this shit for how long? And now I gotta wait 3 more months. I should have just fucking told this lady that I was a hybrid alien starseed from planet Fuckadoodoo. Maybe that would have fucking helped. Maybe that would have helped. But I'm going walking every day. I have been going out and soaking up all of the sun possible and exercising, because that's what my OCD should have been geared toward anyway. And anybody who has obsessive compulsive disorder or bipolar or anything, actually, because it, I think, is all manifestations of OCD. And none of these fucking doctors understand OCD. You have to go to a specialist for that. But they'll call you bipolar real fucking fast. Pieces of shit. Try to play mental games with yourself and pick your addiction. Stop being addicted to the dangerous, horrible fucking things out there and the ruminating thoughts and the fear. And try to get yourself addicted to exercising and caring about yourself, because that's a big fucking problem. When you wake up, especially if you do it spontaneously or timed with a bunch of Jewish shit, and you have no fucking clue how to live in a world that is actually like this, and you've just been brainwashed your whole life and under a sleep spell, basically. Try to care about you as quickly as possible, because that's been my problem. A big part of my problem my whole life is that I care more about everybody fucking else than I ever have about myself. I was a super true crime fanatic. And I used to watch these true crimes and shit, trying to figure out what in the fuck could be making people do these things. Spiritual problems. And I'd be watching these going, what in the fuck is making people torture people and do all of these things? And I would have like survivor's guilt. Literally watching these great people being taken out. I would watch these fucking shows and go like, why don't pieces of shit like me get taken out? Like, why do I get to live and these other poor great people get murdered and stuff? That's not a healthy mentality. And about 1.5 years in, I can tell you for sure that I definitely know that if you do not give a fuck about yourself, running around trying to help everybody else, it's going to get you fucking nowhere. It's going to get you waiting for disability. Because you can't do anything. You're just helpless. This is the most helpless fucking situation and feeling ever, is watching the world burn and knowing it's just because of death cults and because we're in a simulation and all of this shit. And, literally, the United fucking States will roll out the fucking welcome wagons for all of these illegals and let the border crisis happen, so that they could hopefully recruit military, is what I think. People think it's for Democratic voters. Maybe partially, but it's all a selection. It's not really an election. Everybody on the right and the left is wasting their fucking time thinking, delusionally, that their vote counts for anything. It's fucking rigged. Roll out the fucking welcome wagon and put these motherfuckers on food stamps, on HUD, transport them, and then make United States citizens go through fucking hell to get any fucking help, even temporarily. And I'm going to pull up this fucking great Joe Rogan interview that I just watched. I'm going to tack it on to here. Because when I heard this, I was like, oh, yep. That totally explains the border crisis. That totally explains all of the reasons that they have a bunch of Chinese men now migrating here of fighting age. Looks like they're trading citizenship for military service, and that they use to chase away the men and women in the military who would stand up against tyranny and stand up against fucked up orders. I'm gonna pull that shit up, but that's just where I'm at today. I am so lit up, pissed that this is what the fucking government does, and that this is what PA disability does to people they know have kids and no fucking income. Oh, you just be on the waiting list. Just get on the waiting list. I talked to my PCP. I finally got a PCP. She tells me that there are people who have been waiting. They are on 2-year waiting lists to get neuropsychological testing now. Probably that they're going through spiritual awakenings, and they're going, what in the fuck have you done to me? You mentally charged me up this, and I think it's fucking wrong. Now they gotta wait on a 2-year waiting list just to get somebody's fucking time to try to push back against all of these mental fucking diagnoses we've been given. So I'm gonna go to the track. I'm gonna go to the track and try and calm down. But what I will say is, I am on the Mark Passio podcast boot camp that I'm doing. I am 18 episodes in, and I cannot fucking recommend the Mark Passio podcast. What on earth is happening from the bottom? You have to start from number 1. The first 3-4 podcasts, he looks like a bricklayer. He is just laying a foundation, talking about solipsism, talking about psychology, how the mind works. This dude is so intelligent. And the first few episodes, it's very gentle. And then he starts talking about deeper. He literally steamrolls information in such a fascinating and easy to comprehend kind of manner. Like, sometimes I'll just like pause it and think about it. And what happened is I started taking notes. And what I was going to do was try to take notes on all of his podcasts and screenshot them and just make a little collage out of them. Not a collage, a slideshow. And just make a video and put it on here and try to make it as easy for people as fucking possible to get his information who are too lazy to go through listening to it, and that won't work. Your brain needs, at the minimum, the length of that podcast, and then sometimes the rest of the day, and just to think about all of the things that he is saying. And it's proven shit. Fucking fascinating. Fucking fascinating. My buddy who turned me on to Mark Passio, I was like, yeah, dude, I feel like I'm like almost one of those like sapiosexual kind of people where like I'm just really attracted to intelligence. Like, I was like, I think Mark Passio is so fucking, he's so smart. Like, he's fucking attractive because this dude loves him. And I see they do a lot of events and shit out in Philadelphia. And I'm going to take the next 3 months to definitely get through these fucking podcasts and be able to better come to the table with whoever the fuck is NeuroPsych testing me. And I was telling him about how I talked to Guy, and I really, really want to go out to Philly sometime this summer. I would love to go out that way. It's like the most boring drive across the state ever to get to Philly. 5 hours straight across Pennsylvania. And I want to go. And Guy's like all about it. Like, he's definitely getting into this shit. And they have so much shit going on over there, and I can't even fucking believe it. Pittsburgh fucking blows. There's like nobody doing consciousness events or anything like this, or trying to combat the Federal Reserve. And I like literally have so much respect for this guy. Mark Passio, not Guy. Him too. Whatevs. And this guy's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure they have like a movie night every week or something like that. And I was like, movie night with Mark Passio. That sounds great. And he's like, shut the fuck up. It's not a Netflix and chill. Literally, this dude is so fucking intelligent. For anybody out there who... It's literally for anybody fucking out there. Not who this or who that. This information is so valuable. And I'm going for a walk. Doodles! Okay, here's that video. And the guy starts off by talking about extinction level things. I don't think that anything like that's gonna happen, but really interesting interview.
Such that even the elites who make this happen are not going to like the world that they're going to create. They may not even be able to live in it, right? That's the biggest concern I have, right? If I thought that they were diabolical but knew what they were doing, then my sense is, well, all right, we're in for a bad 100 years, and that's terrible, but that's not extinction, right? I think we're actually headed for extinction because I think these people have no idea what they're playing with. They do not understand what needs to be preserved in order to keep the world functional enough for them to live in.
How is that conversation not taking place? That's what doesn't make sense to me.
Well,
is it coming from a place where they never feel like they're ever going to go back to poverty or to any sort of chaotic world that we could envision if everything falls apart?
There are other hypotheses that are darker. There is talk about the possibility of trading citizenship for military service. I think that's a very frightening prospect, but I didn't invent the idea. It has been discussed, and the problem is that to the extent that we saw things like the vaccine mandate drive out the skeptics from the military, this process would also bring in a lot of people into military service who would have more reason to follow immoral orders than a citizen soldier who had been American their whole life. In other words, if the power structure is granting you citizenship which you want in exchange for your obedience, then what is it that would cause you to say no? So if you wanted a force that was capable of acting on behalf of tyranny against Americans, then a force that doesn't have a deep history with the rights of being an American, that doesn't have a long-standing allegiance to people within the country, that force would be potentially more compliant. So, if you imagine, in my naive state a few years ago, the idea was, well, you have a very well-armed populace, you have a military that's likely to be divided about immoral orders. I don't like the sound of that, but I don't think that it's a slam dunk that the tyrants win, because the part of the military that's not going to follow immoral orders and the citizenry that will fight to defend the republic, that's a pretty powerful force. But then you have vaccine mandates, which force out most of the people who are independent-minded from the military, and then you have the idea that migrants might be granted citizenship in exchange for military service. We still have to get whatever that cabal is out of power immediately. This could not be more of an emergency.
And until people decide to understand the truth that who's above the cabal and who's controlling them is reptilians, and we're screwed.
You've seen through how dangerous these people are, how little they care about our well-being, and we have to rally around whatever it is that addresses this problem. And as much as I'm not a believer that Trump on his own can do the job, I would far prefer him to another standard bearer of that cabal. The cabal is too dangerous. And I say this, as you know, I'm a lifelong Democrat, right? This is my party that I'm telling you cannot be trusted with governance. But that's where we are.
The border crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So you went and saw the migration. You saw the groups of people that are making their way up through.
Yeah, I was invited. Actually, my son Zach, and I went to Panama, where I have some history. I did my bat work on Barrow, Colorado Island in Gatun Lake, the Panama Canal. So Panama's a place I'm familiar with, but Michael Yon invited us down to go look at the migration in the Darien province of Panama, which is the province bordering Colombia. As you probably know, there's a gap in the Pan American Highway, about 60 miles, that were never built. In this highway that otherwise stretches from Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, to the southern tip of South America. And what's there is a tremendously significant and very difficult jungle in the Darien Gap. So there's a national park there, and ordinarily people do not cross the Darien Gap. It is a famously difficult obstacle. And what we see there is that the international community is encouraging a massive migration of people from South America into Central America, and that almost all of those people are ending up crossing our southern border and entering the U.S. The ones who are questioned are claiming political asylum, which is not accurate. So we talked to many, many migrants, and the universal story amongst the migrants who would talk to us is that they were fleeing bad economic conditions in the direction of what looks like greater opportunity. They've been told by the international community that they should come across the Darien Gap, where many of them are not surviving the trek. It's extremely dangerous. And they're migrating north. Now, the really troubling thing, though, is that migration is familiar in one way. It looks a little bit like the migrations of Central Americans that migrated north when we were kids. But there is another migration. There is a migration of Chinese immigrants that looks different, feels different, and is being housed in a totally separate way in Darien for reasons that are not in any way obvious. Now, I don't know exactly what to make of that. I have hypotheses. There are no more than that. But the Chinese migration is not forthcoming about why it is migrating. It is composed mostly of young military-aged men. There are some women present, but it's not 50-50 by far. And the international community has arranged separate encampments. The Chinese are in many cases traveling a separate way across the Darien Gap. They're skipping some of the worst parts of it, traveling by boat. And as I think I mentioned, they are, when asked where they're from, where they're going, why they're going, they are uninterested in talking. There's a hostility to it that I found shocking. Because for one thing, if you imagined folks from almost anywhere in the world were heading to the U.S. because they didn't like the way things were in China, they feared their government, they thought that there was economic opportunity, they would be curious about Americans. These are soon to be their countrymen. They would tend to be interested in talking. And even if they, for some reason, because they had lived under a totalitarian regime, felt that they couldn't talk, they wouldn't be broadcasting hostility. They would be ambivalent or something. And that is not the impression that they leave when interacting with them. So I found that utterly alarming. And I came to wonder if the migration of people coming up from South America, many of whom, by the way, are not South American. There are people coming from the Middle East. We met Afghans. There are people from Iran, Yemen, all over the world. They land in Ecuador, which has no visa requirement, and then they migrate through Colombia into Central America and straight up to the U.S. But in any case, that massive migration seems to provide a cloak for this other migration from China, which is nothing if not mysterious.
Why are they letting it happen? Why do you think the government is allowing the border to be so porous? And why are they resisting when Texas tries to do something about it?
Well, I always worry when we're trying to understand what's happening and the information is not being shared with us. You have to ask yourself the question of how many separate things are in play, right? Before I went to Panama, I thought there was a migration of people. Now I think there are two. One of them's clearly a migration, and the other one could well be an invasion. So if I know that there are two things, then I can put them in two categories, and I can ask myself the question, why is this being allowed and why is that being allowed? The consensus, maybe consensus is too strong, but the belief amongst many who have been on the story of the migration for years now is that this is a ploy to create voters, Democratic voters. And I don't think that's impossible. I think that's probably playing a role. I don't know how realistic it is. I don't know whether or not it is clear that migrants necessarily carry the likelihood of voting blue that the blue team imagines. But anyway, I think that that's a plausible explanation in part, but I don't think it really covers it. There are other hypotheses that are darker. There is talk about the possibility of trading citizenship for military service. I think that's a very frightening prospect, but I didn't invent the idea. It has been discussed, and the problem is that to the extent that we saw things like the vaccine mandate drive out the skeptics from the military, this process would also bring in a lot of people into military service who would have more reason to follow immoral orders than a citizen soldier who had been American their whole life. In other words, if the power structure is granting you citizenship which you want in exchange for your obedience, then what is it that would cause you to say no? So if you wanted a force that was capable of acting on behalf of tyranny against Americans, then a force that doesn't have a deep history with the rights of being an American, that doesn't have a long-standing allegiance to people within the country, that force would be potentially more compliant, and that worries me.
That should worry you. I really didn't consider that until you just said that. But my thought about this idea of the military turning on the citizens was always, but the military is citizens. And many of them are deeply patriotic and unlikely to do something like that. But if they did swap out immigrants, and they did do that, holy shit.
This is exactly...
Then you have a real coup.
This is what spooks me, is that in thinking about the various scenarios 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, I would have said, I fear that somebody is going to issue immoral orders to the military, but I'm convinced that the military will divide over them. That there are those who will carry out immoral orders, and there are others who won't.
And at the same time, there's a senator, I think, from Massachusetts that introduced a bill to ban what they call paramilitary training, which is just training with firearms, like to get better at them.
Right.
So the idea is you have a right to keep and bear arms, but you can't be good at them because you can't practice.
So if you imagine, in my naive state a few years ago, the idea was, well, you have a very well-armed populace. You have a military that's likely to be divided about immoral orders. I don't like the sound of that, but I don't think that it's a slam dunk that the tyrants win, because the part of the military that's not going to follow immoral orders and the citizenry that will fight to defend the republic, that's a pretty powerful force. But then you have vaccine mandates, which force out most of the people who are independent-minded from the military. And then you have the idea that migrants might be granted citizenship in exchange for military service. And
has that been introduced anywhere, or is this just a complete hypothesis?
No, it's not a hypothesis. Actually, maybe Jamie, you could look it up. I don't want to slander anybody, but yes, I believe it has been raised by at least one senator.
Jesus Christ.
Is that the paramilitary thing?
No. The other thing, the thing about granting citizenship to illegal immigrants in exchange for military service.
So, in any case, I did not. It took a lot of thinking about different pieces of the puzzle to begin to wonder about something like this. But having wondered about it, it doesn't disappear from my mind as though that's just simply crazy. Actually, given the number of things that don't add up, this begins to explain them in, a reasonably parsimonious way, and it has me worried. But that is not inherently, in fact, it is probably not the same thing as what would explain the concentration of Chinese migrants. Right? The Chinese migrants presumably have left China with the knowledge of their government. The bias of that group in favor of males is something we can talk about if you want to, but it has an obvious interpretation. And that ought to frighten us as well, right? So at the same...
How many are we talking about? Is there an estimate of how many military-aged Chinese men have gotten into the country?
Now, I'm always hesitant at this point in the conversation, because what I saw is what one person looks at through their eyes, so I'm in no position to estimate that. But I believe we are talking about tens of thousands. Certainly, when we're talking about the entire migration, we are talking about millions. And the number that is flowing through Central America, the flow-through rate in a given day is many thousands. So it's hard to know, and I would want somebody who was in a position to look at an estimate, not just a spot check.
So if the tyrannical government is playing some long game of chess, these are the pieces they would be moving.
I could find out a number.
The U.S. GOV are the biggest terrorists this world has ever seen, I think.